Bulgarian researcher, the New Earth Lady, believes Australia got integrated into the culture of the people that she identified as the survivors, only in its last stages. In other words, the last stages of the survivor culture as such, when they were at a point of building star forts. Before that, she states, the contacts of the Aboriginal people with this culture were only fragmental. Of course, even those distant connections were overlooked. They're not allowed in the archaeological history because they always try to convince us that in the past we were underdeveloped. We lacked sophistication. We lacked technology for intercontinental travel, of course, according to their version of history. But that's not true, she states. Let's look at whatever little artifacts and sites in the region have escaped the controlled demolition and theft of our historic heritage carried out by the archaeologists. Did you know that ancient Egyptian people also used boomerangs? Experiments have shown that they also functioned as a returning boomerangs, which we also see in Australia. The Egyptian boomerangs are officially called magic ones. So it's not that easy for the people to notice the Egyptian and Australian connections, she believes. Now this is from the area of the Gympie Pyramid. This artifact looks almost Indian, she states, and so does this Ganesh. And as far as the Gympie Pyramid itself, it appears to be demolished already. But recently new information emerged showing that probably part of the structure, part of the walls, was saved and then rebuilt at a different location. Most likely, the story that this young lady is telling is how the wall was rebuilt and by her relatives. That must be true, she believes, because who would invest nowadays so much work to build a polygonal wall from scratch? Again, this is from the Gympie area. By the way, on the internet there are long lists of similar artifacts, but it's hard to find photographs of them. But she did manage to find numerous complaints of citizens who had found such things. They submitted them to the authorities, and after that, everything disappears. The photographs, together with the artifacts, and in some cases even the authorities which have accepted the artifacts, deny having done so. And again, the same situation as other megalithic sites around the globe. We have no clue how they cut the solid bauxite. In the vicinity of the famous and highly controversial Gosforth glyphs, there does seem to be very interesting and intriguing shafts. These are also stones resembling polygonal stonework. On the top, there appear to be boulders of molten on one side, and the whole area is very controversial. Most likely, we are talking about a category of megaliths and stones which have been grown, cultivated, which is a very, very new emerging area of exploration, of which we know very little, she believes. Possibly she could find some new clues in an upcoming expedition, but for now she is completely puzzled, as on one side of the boulder it would look absolutely completely natural, and yet on the other side there are traces of intelligent design, she states. It is really puzzling, and probably the famous Kiminava Wall in New Zealand is one out of these structures which are on the border of intelligently made and natural. And it's not just artifacts, we have also found people that seem to be connected to this Egyptian-style culture. This is an interesting burial from New Zealand. These things are sarcophagus-styled. They are carved out of a single piece of wood, and they also had elaborate engravings. Unfortunately, they don't show in the only photographs she could find, so in general their coffins were definitely similar to Egyptian sarcophagi, and the people inside them belonged to a Caucasian race, she believes. Their features were clearly not the Australian, Aboriginal or Polynesian or anything else of that sort, she believes. Here is the blonde mummy from New Zealand. As everyone else in this region, including Japan and China, Caucasian people were the original inhabitants, and not only in that region but also in America. This was a red-haired shaman. Her hair was an amazing 3 meters long. But what happened to them in Australia and New Zealand, she asks. This is what happened to them. This is yet another pile of the leftovers from a cannibal feast, because when the Polynesian, the Melanesian cannibals cultures settled in the region, they started using the locals as a food source. The forces which were bringing about these changes managed to remove the people, kill them, get them eaten, but sadly for the archaeologists who would stumble later on the bones, were still left to testify for their existence. So the archaeologists had to devise a plan to dispose of these uncomfortable bones. At this point, the Industrial Revolution comes to give a hand. And this chimney-looking building below was part of a factory, which some estimated 60,000 or more skeletons were turned into fertilizer products during the 1860s through to the 1870s. These tribes with the fair hair are easily declared as fairy tribes, although there is a good number of legitimate accounts of some pockets that are still alive from that population, even within the colonial times started in this region of Australia and New Zealand. Here they knew about the practice of the elongated skulls. These were people well connected with the world. They were not in complete isolation for 40,000 years, as the archaeologists would tell us. Some Aborigines in this area still have a light golden hair colour that doesn't occur naturally in their race. The facial features of others also seem a bit mixed with the Caucasian races. And they also place Atlantean fashion and bands on their foreheads, she believes. The red strip is identical to that in Europe on the left, and on the right are Aborigines. And now the same band we can see on the left is now an American native girl. And the deity that you see on the top of the house protecting it with its tongue out is also celebrated in their dances. It's the same protective deity in the form of a dwarf that was widely worshipped in ancient Egypt and in Europe. Eucalyptus oil is also considered as one of the ingredients used in embalming the dead in Egypt, making mummies. So again, we find a connection to Australia and New Zealand. But this may be a long shot, as Egypt was tropical at one point, not so long ago. So God knows what kind of trees were growing there as well, she states. The megalithic wall in New Zealand remained unexplored for many years. But now, she continues, please pay attention to the tattoos on locals, especially in New Zealand, on their faces. If they were developing and living separately from other cultures of Europe and all over the world, then how come they're doing the exact same thing that everybody else is doing, tattooing their face, she asks. Now these are ladies from Myanmar and Cambodia, and this is a Aino lady from Japan, same thing, tattooing of their faces. And this is a Chinese-style face tattoo used by some tribes in China. These are Inuit ladies from Greenland. So did they start doing the same thing like this all by chance? Or did it come to their minds independently, she asks. No, she states. Most likely not. It's more likely that the face art was part of a primeval culture. But it must have been huge, as tribes from Borneo and the Inuits are on the other side of the globe from Australia. And this is a Mojave native from California. same face tattoos. Here the archaeologists used the standard trick by talking about 4,000 years ago, when practically we have almost zero information on how things were because it's so long ago, it's mystical and it sounds so scientific. And in this mysterious cloud, in this fog of scientifically sounding things, she states, people forgot to examine the actual evidence at hand. That there are clear connections, numerous cultural parallels between cultures which existed centuries ago, not thousands of years ago. Besides the face petals, look at the Dillick mark on the forehead of the Aborigine on the right. Millions still use that same Dillick mark in India. This is Christ. He is also depicted sometimes as having a possible similar mark. Sometimes we see Romans depicted with a similar mark on their foreheads. The reports of shipwrecks that do not fit the official history are abundant in the region, and all of them are still waiting for somebody to explore them. But there is an explanation for everything. Well, officially, these mysteries are not explored because it would infringe on the rights of the native people. This is an extremely weird explanation, she believes, because nobody cares about their rights when they kill them or take away their land. Yet, when it comes to unveiling the true history, those laws for their protection are recited very loudly in a very weird twist. And here we see people protesting against this preposterous behaviour. But the protesters don't understand that such actions will have very little results. Why? She asks. Because until people stop watching TV and believe in the paradigm that it is normal for the government to have rights on the land that you were born on, until this mistaken belief is not uprooted, no protests will help, because the basis of their full paradigm is wrong, she states. The land on which you were born belongs to you and your body, she states. It belongs to you, period. But you will continue to watch TV, which mesmerizes you to the point of surrendering those basic rights of yours to the state. Holding slogans and screaming on the squares will do you no good. The worldwide network of lines and Nazca-like figures is also there in Australia, and is actually relatively well preserved because the continent is so scarcely populated. There are roads made by the farmers. In some parts they are as wide as a 6-lane boulevard, perfectly straight for 15 or 100 kilometers in the area where there aren't any farmers. It doesn't look like a farmer's track at all. The real farmer roads are quite different. This is a real one. It follows the terrain. It's not straight. It actually goes from point A to point B. These other roads seem to be something entirely different. Just have a look and try to make sense of them for your own. This is how they look on the ground. Those farmers must have hired a very expensive team of people who measure the earth to make them so straight. She can't even imagine the expense to hire the equipment to clean all the trees from the area. Here they have made an avenue, she states, for 10 cars wide, and it wasn't wide enough. That's why they widened it substantially. That's why we see a couple of lines next to each other to avoid traffic congestions. So some people may say, but the farmers do use these lines as roads after all. But this doesn't mean that they have built them in the same way, like the residents of this village in Iran who live in homes which they found ready-made. In the Vedas, and also in some of the old sacred books from the state of Tamil Nadu, we have references to a lost ancient continent called Kumari Kandam. The location of the continent, and to some extent the story which is told about it, is confirmed by the set material channeled by Jane Roberts, who sadly remains, at least for her, the only and absolutely most reliable source for extremely ancient history, she believes. As far as the relatively recent history of Bhume, Vedas clearly speak about a time, very recent time, when righteous rulers spread their influence all over the world, which is exactly what we find in terms of artifacts and cultural heritage, which she has been showing us that for many episodes already, we find the traces of a single worldwide civilization, and most importantly, the social structure was meant to serve as a direct bridge between the benevolent, higher, advanced living beings in the universe and the human races. We were repeatedly brainwashed in school that all the cultures were primitive and limited to their lands or at maximum their continent. Because of this ongoing endeavour to erase any trace of the message of the benevolent forefathers and our creators who gave us the instructions of Sanatana Dharma, the teachings of how to live in happiness and prosperity, at the same time we get on well with our education as learning souls, the purpose for which we were born. She wishes to continue and show us a few curious things left from the times when the Hindus were still following Sanatana Dharma. These musical pillars of Hapai in India are one of the examples for designing certain interior architectural elements. As musical instruments, each pillar plays a given musical note, and you can play music on them. Some of the pillars are missing. They have been destroyed by the British, she claims. They thought, oh, let's see how they made it. Some of the pillars must be hollow. That's why the stone appears to have a very different density or something like that, she believes. They even damaged the temple just to find out that the columns are not hollow. Rather, they're made using a technique we simply don't understand. But we have very good knowledge of how to destroy everything, how to dissect it. And then we show great creativity in finding the stupidest explanations for what we have done, she suggests. For example, with the money that we pay day to day as taxes, even when you go to the shop you pay 20% tax just because we want to buy some food. All that goes to various laboratories where animals and lots of people are tortured, she claims. But we close our eyes and say, oh, it's done in the name of discovering new medicines so that humanity doesn't suffer. If better healthcare was the actual intention, our Vedic traditional Hindu medicine would be implemented in all the hospitals around the world, along with the advanced Tibetan traditional medicines, and along with countless other natural cures that we still haven't forgotten. Countless scientific publications showed that these medicines, even nowadays in a downgraded version, are far more effective than the poisons that are being administered by the modern pharmacies, she suggests. Next to the musical pillars at Hampi are hung chains made of stone. The British destroyed that as well. They were not sure how they were made, so the reaction was to destroy them. Fortunately, we have some examples which survived in other temples. Look at the top of the Hampi temple, she asks. Please note how the building technique and style is absolutely identical to that of the temples that she showed us in a couple of previous episodes. Those from Cambodia, Myanmar, Indonesia, Thailand, China, and here in Vietnam, and all the way to Teotihuacan in Mexico. Again, some people came and taught them how to make very strong cement and dress the stone with the cement. So the history, as it is given in the Hindu Vedas, tell us about wise people who were on educational missions all around the world and could possibly be confirmed by the artifacts, and whatever little historic records have escaped destruction. In Egypt, we also have vague remains of oral history being transmitted from generation to generation. They also speak of a worldwide civilization to which the advanced glorious Egypt belonged, she states. The Ellora caves in India, the sheer scale of everything, the sheer size strips credibility from the official explanations of how all this was made. Ellora is just one of the many such sites in India, she believes. She won't even discuss the idea of making all this manually, the simple way as we were told. Forget about making it. We can't even destroy it manually, she states. Yes, foreign invaders mobilized divisions and sent them to destroy this temple, but the stone is so hard that they could only inflict minor damages over a long period of time. Eventually, the destroyers just gave up. They reported it was an impossible mission because the stone was too hard. This is an entire network of intricate tunnels below the Ellora caves, and very little is known about them, for the simple reason that they are too small for humans to go into. Our devices can tell us that they are very little, only confirming that the tunnels continue very deep inside the bedrock. She wonders what the archaeologists would come up with as an explanation for this. Possibly that the tunnels in Central Asia were made by small children, though they must have been 2 to 3 months old newborn babies. They certainly may have been able to fit their heads inside the tunnels. The topic about constructing this type of temple in India came up during a past life regression conducted by Anton Aksanov, and the person to whom we must thank, she believes, discovered amazing information that suggested the stone was grown like mushrooms, like plants in antiquity. And he is the only person that she is aware of who systematically and responsibly uses trance states as a tool to recover history. So here are the questions put in front of the person who was in trance. How did the Hindus, as we know them today, build these temples? The answer, of course not. The actual builders, a human type, disappeared not so long ago, some 250 to 300 years ago. Later on in the regression session, she states, he saw how there was a far bigger structure than what we can see now, but everything was sealed, archived almost, because they were very special places of power, which had to be hidden from the small, stupid race of people, which are, of course, you and me, she claims. The small people would know how to utilize these places of power. For example, some people would come to such holy places preloaded with ideas of aggression, and so the most special places of power were hidden, with layers of stone manifested on the top as a crown to protect us, amongst other reasons, which are not necessarily less important from our own destructive thoughts, she suggests, which would materialize much faster if we were able to connect with these special places and the crystals kept in them. Giant cuttings were made in this way. It looks pretty simple until you actually have to do it. We can't even do it with our modern machines. We do employ a similar method, but we're not there yet, she states. We need many such cuttings to split a single boulder. We don't yet know the single hole technique that is almost 200 years old, she believes. At Mahabalipuram, they could do it with only one. And even that single cutting, how did they make it in a very large stone, with primitive instruments, she asks. The columns of certain temples in the state of Karnataka have become pretty popular lately. Finally, we find something in these magnificent old temples which is simple enough for us to comprehend. Something that our simplistically tuned intellect can relate to, she states. All the other stuff, with the endless intricate carvings and all of their meanings, is just too overwhelming for the simplistic mind of the modern man, she states. Another reason why these columns are so famous is that they have been made using an old turning machine, or at least that's how they look like. Constructing a turning machine that could have handled columns of this size would have been massive work for loads of people who obviously knew quite a bit about engineering. But she finds the finesse of the artwork much more impressive than the turning machines. With this necklace, There is a 1 to 2 millimeter cut through the body of the lady and the necklace. How did they do this? Or what about these tiny faces? They're completely hollow inside. One can insert a twig not only between the ears, but also the mouth and the ears, and so on. Why and how did they chisel it out, she asks. Again, such tiny holes, somewhere on a minor border for decoration. Again, why? As usual, as we noticed also at other places, the older the temple, the more advanced, at least for our understanding, technology would have been required to build it. Or who knows, maybe we are even asking the wrong questions. Maybe they didn't need any technology to shape them. Sometimes, in past life regressions that she has been referring to, there are mentioned even a couple of 100 years ago, still the races of people existed which could still manifest things just with their own thoughts, she claims, to materialize them from the ether plane without the need of any tools. In those earlier times, India meant a faraway, unknown place. That's why the travellers centuries ago called India and places in America, Africa, China, Persia, and in the Middle East even, in present-day India, all these were various Indias. So when the powers that be were cooking up the new history of India, they could write pretty much anything they wished. And they would find the confirmation quote somewhere very easily. For example, in this single map alone, one can see 3 Indias. Of course, all the quotes which were patched up together to provide the backbone for the newly fabricated Indian history were always accounts given by foreigners, like for example the account of Alexander the Great written by Aristotle himself. It sounds so legitimate. Let's look at some of the details about the weather of India mentioned in those accounts. It was according to his words 6 months summer and 6 months winter. And what kind of winter? A Turkish national drowned in the snow. They couldn't bury him because they had fell so deep inside the snow. According to Aristotle, some 500 troops of the soldiers of Alexander the Great died in India due to a very heavy snowfall. And then how does this account describe the people of India, she asks. They wore seal skins. India does have a couple of high mountains where snowfall occurs, but if Alexander the Great was marching to it with an army with an intent to conquer it, would he and could he teleport himself directly to the highest mountain peaks with the snow and seals for some reason, and miss out completely the normal parts of the country, she asks. All these stories with the seals and the extreme snowfall could be a legitimate account of India. But the question is, which India? Here we have an entire scene of foreigners, probably Africans, coming with a giraffe. They seem to be handling something, maybe gifts to the Indian Maharaja on the elephant. She says foreigners because the people around the giraffe, they're distinctly different from the Indians, who are always depicted with full sets of jewellery and the typical Indian outfits. Transporting a live giraffe all the way from Africa is not that easy in terms of logistics, she states. So in India, as everywhere else we see the same picture, people were very well connected with the rest of the world, and they were all part of the one world culture, a culture which honoured the gods and the principles of goodness, she believes. In the past, these cultural bridges between different races were created to enrich those who were involved, to make their lives better. Nowadays, the idea of one world and brotherhood, and everybody loves each other, all this is preached with the exact opposite purpose, she states. So the one world culture was something beneficial when it was used to spread the message of the belief of benevolent gods, or creators. And when the same concept is used to expand and strengthen the cobweb of evil, we think twice before enthusiastically voting for that. So as we saw in our episode about Japan, even the modern Hindu pundits, Sanatana Dharma pundits started becoming aware that actually their rishis, the sages, their original teachers, came from the North Pole. which is exactly the place where Hyperborea used to be. They didn't decide that just by listening to a beautiful abstract Vedic poetry, she states. There was much more exact science behind it. A branch of the Vedas is called Jyotisastra, and it deals mainly with astrology. But this astrology is backed up by amazingly precise and good knowledge of astronomy. So to make a long story short, they tried to discover places based on records of how the stars were located at a given moment. Also, they would know the time because the time would be recorded along with the stars. For example, she states, this is a traditional kundali, or what we in the West call astrological chart, showing somebody's birth chart. So always in this kundali, they need to calculate very precisely the exact position of all the planets. But when they try to determine where exactly in India's given historic event was taking place, they found out that it was not even in India. And then they started looking for a place at which the given kundali would have been. And it turned out it was the North Pole. Exactly the location of Hyperborean, she believes. So during the history of the Earth, various groups were coming to educate the simple cavemen, to mingle with them, to intermarry them, to teach them technology and religion. But in relatively recent times, it seems that those who were doing it with good intentions were the Hyperboreans, she believes. Did they, she asks? Or was it the people who lived in the now cold areas of Europe and Siberia? Were they spreading the knowledge which they received from the Hyperboreans? We don't know exactly. But the truth seems to be coming forth. Not only the Indians discovered the Hyperborean connections, but also there is something going on in Russia. Something which may end up playing the leading role in the upcoming events on Earth, and yet there is no news coverage at all, she states. Currently, she states, the parasitic mass media will waste your time with all kinds of rumours, gossips, or straightforward lies about Putin mostly. But they don't want you to know that many simple Russians lately are becoming aware of the Vedic roots of their Slavic culture. Yes, exactly, she states. This is how they call it even in their own language. The key words are Vitigasky Rus or Slaviansk Vedi, which means Slavic Vedas. Since we were always told to connect to the Vedic literature with India only, somebody may get confused and think the Russians are looking for connections with India, and that's why they have adopted the term, she believes. But this is not true, she states. There were Slavic Vedas. People just rediscovered them. And they are called the Vedas as well, in their own Slavic languages. The verb Veda means to know. It is still in use within some Slavic languages, and even those that don't use it are aware if they hear it, and it will sound to them like an archaic word, but they don't understand it, she believes. Not only the name of the literature is the same, but the message is also the same, left by what in India is called the Adityas, the advanced beings of goodness, or the gods of goodness. Scripts, which were used in the very old times in all these Nordic regions of Europe and Siberia, are also similar to the Devanagari script, which is the main script used for writing down the Indian Vedic literature. So what is this big change in Russia, she asks. Russians started abandoning the parasitic paradigm, and they are simply leaving its grip. They go to live in the wild, and this is not just a way for some people to avoid the cobweb of evil. This is the only way to do it. If you continue sitting at home with your TV while drinking alcohol, you swear loudly at the banksters and all your other slave masters. You will never get out of the cobweb. Indeed, your hatred is what it feeds off. It is exactly your feelings of anger, depression, and helplessness which provide to fuel this cobweb. This is an incomplete map of settlements of people who have decided to leave the cobweb. The first wave were really the type of people which most people would describe as New Age type folks. But then the second wave, which is a much bigger and much more powerful, were usually people with relatively high positions in society. People with higher education. People that we would describe as intellectuals, she states. They decided, why should they stay in the city and get sprayed with poison trails and live in pollution and noise? If they can go and live in one of these communities the way their forefathers did in these types of settlements, the English term is settlement, but in Russia they call it ordovaya poselenie, which also means clan settlement. Of course, these people came straight out from the web. They didn't even know that their forefathers lived in harmony with nature, she states. You see, this one didn't even manage to pack the right type of trousers. But as Edgar Cayce told us, it will take some time, but they will learn. Edgar said during trance, it will take years for it to be crystallized, but out of Russia comes again the hope of the world. Another Edgar Cayce quote confirming the same. And he is not the only proven prophet who said that the first sprouts of the paradigm of love and peace will appear in Russia. But amongst the common people, this should not be confused with Putin or any other centralized organization, she states. The government of Russia is almost as corrupt and rotten as that of the United States of America or the United States of Europe, she believes. Yes, one could say that the mass media of Russia is slightly more truthful than the rest of the world, but the overall situation is not much different. The same poison spread from the sky and the rest of the package. So this is a typical house from one of the settlements in Russia. Not everybody can afford the better looking house straight away, but that's not important for them at this point. People who go there understand that the most important part of them is freedom to start with, and then the full process of reuniting again with nature. Although at this point some people living in the woods in the so-called clan settlements could barely look like something that could shake the parasitic web, but it seems eventually they will. Another Edgar Cayce quote states, unless various interference from what we called many of the supernatural forces and influences that are active in the affairs of nations and peoples, the whole world, as it were, will be set on fire by the militaristic groups and those that are for power and expansion in such associations. Germany is the only other place in the world, at least, that she is aware of where such communities, cobweb communities, started appearing in such great concentration as Russia. That is why the German government took drastic measures to rise the crime levels. This, she alleges, was accomplished through the medium of various governmental problems and initiatives, and as usual, they had very humanitarian-sounding names. Scandinavia, up until a couple of decades ago, only the Scandinavian people used to live there. The crime rates were extremely low, much lower than anywhere else in the world. It was the nature of the people. And what happened? Just after a couple of decades of hard governmental work on lowering the sum total of the human consciousness, she asks. There are war-type zones. There are no-go zones. Even policemen avoid entering these zones. If they do, they are attacked immediately with fire and stones. Their cars are burned, and they require bulletproof vests, vehicles with special equipment. How could the most peaceful people on Earth be reduced to such a miserable condition in just a few decades? Using the various government-organized programs, she states, all of the programs fall under the slogan of loving everybody, especially in an international way. Lately, she was reading the records of the hypnotic regressions of Anton Roxana, and especially the topic of New Age, which he calls the new space. According to information which she obtained from various people independently, people in trance, she means, this new space is kind of a new layer of reality which is initially created by this very same race, the Hyperboreans, or the people who learned from them. Anybody who has a human body, every soul that wears a human body currently can get plugged into this new reality, she believes. Gradually, of course, this would be kind of predetermined already at the point when the soul makes the plan for its future incarnation, and the souls who have decided to take this path and plug into this new layer. Initially, in them, this would manifest as a strong urge, a call from inside to reconnect with nature and start learning from it according to the channeled information. Although the Hyperboreans lived on Earth in what we would classify as historic times, she states, they created the new space for the current historic moment because, being advanced as they were, they, or maybe at least some of their shamans, or even maybe beings from the astral realm who are responsible for overseeing the flow of historic events on Earth, possibly they saw the balance between good and evil on Earth as seriously disrupted to the point at which the situation is no longer suitable for the souls to learn their karmic lessons. At that point they decided to create the new space for those who do not wish to live in the parasitic mesh and don't feel comfortable in it. They will have a place to escape. Exploring the new space is completely optional for those who find it acceptable to have an implant stuck in their brains so that somebody can control them remotely, she states. They can remain in the cobweb for as long as they wish. They will remain as long as they believe in it. Actually, she believes, from what we can learn about Atlantis from Edgar Casey, it seems they reached a very similar point like us nowadays. He said that the forces of evil in Atlantis came up with such machines and devices that eventually even started tampering with parts of the soul, with the very structure of the earth realm. And all this setup of souls incarnated under blind conditions while particles of them remain in the astral plane to oversee the entire learning process. So as we have covered already, evil is a teacher. It is meant to test us, to teach us. But when it comes to the point that it makes the learning process impossible, of course the whole experiment, the full setup, will need to be reset, to be changed. That's what they did in Atlantis. And this is the point that we're also nearing, she believes. She doesn't know if it's months or years, but they will start hunting people in the streets and putting implants in them by force. Well, that's a bit extreme, she states. How can you learn if you don't even have a choice, and then to be remote-controlled a zombie? It seems exactly that point, she states. The higher forces which oversee the development of the civilizations on Earth will start getting involved, very actively at least. That's what the prophets who have proven themselves are telling us. Since most of us have been born and grown up in a very dense environment, ignorance for many, this process of learning from nature, at least initially, will be a kind of mild and symbolic, and it could still be categorized as just increased creativity, a very strong intuition. For others who have already from previous lives have a background in magic and have already taken some lessons in previous lives in manipulating the material energy with thought forms and things like this, they could start at a higher level. They could even make contacts with various nature spirits. So what would be the meaning in practical terms of being plugged into this new layer, she asks. The main thing is more flexibility, which means that thought forms would materialize as objects or events much faster. Words are the power of magic in flexible environments or spheres like the new space. Imagine what kind of sewage would we swim in if things were manifesting as fast as people who preach the so-called very simple and effective law of attraction. Luckily, it doesn't work as easy as they describe. Otherwise, we wouldn't find any place to hide from our ugly manifestations, she states. All the anger, frustration, jealousy, fear and revenge, because that is the majority of what people feel most of the time. But the new space will be a learning environment, for example. She believes one would find it difficult to hurt an animal in that environment because the body of those who are plugged in will be more finely tuned, and the waves of the suffering of this animal will be felt in your own being, directly. That is just one example illustrating how it would feel to live in a higher environment, a lighter layer, a flexible layer. Getting plugged to the new space would be much easier for those who live in a natural environment. It would be harder in the cities, and not only because of the noise and the pollution, it would make it harder to concentrate with the towers of debt over our heads. The black magic of the governments, she believes, are specifically designed to tune your brain to a layer of reality with abundant sewage around them, anger, frustration and fear. It is not by chance that when so-called ordinary people visit the Arctic and Antarctic regions, they are often report spontaneously reaching altered states of consciousness. In many cases, even astral visions open in front of them. In many cases, these are people who have no interest in meditation, spirituality, or anything else of that sort. Now, most modern people would describe this as a strange phenomenon, or they will consider the altered states of consciousness as a strange or unusual phenomenon themselves. But the truth is that if you live in the human body and you don't experience such things, that is even stranger, because the human race has an inbuilt capability, and not using them means closing themselves off to a very small portion of reality, she believes. The organs and functionalities in our bodies which are responsible for astral experiences, they are suppressed by the black magic waves from the dead towers. The radiation and noise from various gadgets and devices around us, such as Wi-Fi and other similar invisible frequencies, and various poisons administered to us through our water supply, doctors, etc. Actually, she states, the effect of these towers and the waves of radiation from various devices is so strong that just by getting away from that and going to the Arctic and the Antarctic regions where they don't have any installed, this getting away by itself is enough for many people that they start perceiving astral beings directly without any endeavour, or even asking for it. They always had the organs for this, but because it was suppressed and also nobody explained to them what they have, they were not even aware they had them. Living in the countryside wouldn't give as great a result as being in the Antarctic or the Arctic region, but still some relief would be proportionate to how remote the region was.